All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today across the country and around the world. I'm Karen Salmon, CEO of Conscious Capitalism. On behalf of the CCI team, we appreciate you taking the time to learn and grow with our community today. We're excited to be sharing the space with Dom Farnan, CEO of .Connect, to discuss the inside shift, rediscovering purpose and fulfillment as a business leader, and to talk to her about her new book, Here Now, a journey from toxic boss to conscious connector. As many of you know, Conscious Capitalism is a global community of CEOs, presidents, founders, board members, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders from diverse industries, backgrounds, and perspectives who are committed to the shared purpose of elevating humanity through business. Founded in 2008, as a not-for-profit, CCI provides our community of active operating leaders a platform to convene, connect, participate in workshops and interactive discussions with practical advice and tools on how Conscious Capitalism principles are integrated into different organizations and within various industries. Our community of conscious capitalists offer best practices and business strategies on how the philosophy is applied to create sustainable success within one's business, leading to systemic change and impact in the world. At Conscious Capitalism, we do this by creating learning opportunities like today's session and building systems of support for practicing conscious capitalists throughout the Conscious Leader Network membership as partners with the organization and engagement with our local chapters. Several times a month, CCI offers virtual gatherings like this in a way for the community to see how the philosophy takes shape in the leadership journeys and the business practices of those within our network. So today's gathering is going to last about 45 minutes. Dom and I will be in conversation for about 30 to 35, and then we're going to transition to audience questions during the last 10 to 15 minutes of our session. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to get to as many of the questions as we can during our time. If you have any technical questions or issues, please email us at info@consciouscapitalism.org. Now, I'm excited to introduce you to Dom Farnan.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, Dom. I'm going to do a quick intro, and then we'll jump into our conversation. So in 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, Dom Farnan had no choice but to reflect and heal. From the outside, it looked like everything was perfectly okay, but then it became harder and harder for her to ignore what was really happening to her in her inner life. By working with a coach, she started the difficult journey of addressing the depression and toxicity of her life that had made her disengaged from the world around her. By making the conscious effort to shift her thoughts and her actions, she was able to change her life in a way that positively impacted everything that she did, including her business. Dom, author of Now, Here, and I will discuss how she pursued her own healing journey and how doing her inner work is what brings the idea that conscious leadership is an inside job to life. We'll dive into how taking similar steps in your personal and professional journey can supercharge your company's conscious culture and in turn help you and your team experience exponential growth. As founder and CEO of .Connect, a recruiting firm, Dom will also explain what conscious hiring means, how to unlock opportunities this approach can bring, the price of getting the hiring process wrong, and tangible examples of her company has experienced as a result of her personal healing. Wow. Dom, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you all.
Yeah, this is great. So Here Now, Here, a book about your journey to now, and what really got you here. And I really loved reading. I told you that as I read it, I could really feel who you are, the people and the events that shaped you, your incredible drive and perseverance, to be successful, to win, that led actually to a breakdown, then a reemergence. So why don't you tell us about a little bit about you, and give us the frame of, you know, who you are as a person. Let's just start there. Who you are as a person and what shaped you in your early life.
Yeah, I love that. To keep it brief, I mean, who I am as a person, I'm a mother, I'm a partner, I'm a friend, and I'm a leader. And I believe that I'm a humble student of the world. So I'm always learning. I've had a passion and love for learning new things since I was a little girl. And I was blessed in my lifetime to have an amazing grandmother. And her name was Dorothy. And we called her Dottie. And through that became the name of my company, Dot Connect, which is her name, Dorothy Constance combined. And she just believed in me. So, you know, when I was little, I had somebody that was pouring into me, loving me unconditionally, and believing in anything that I brought to the table. And that was really encouraging and inspiring. So the book I dedicated to her and to my son, because, you know, my son is my greatest teacher as well. But yeah, that's who I am. And I have the privilege and honor of leading Dot Connect, my recruiting company. And yeah, being a member of Conscious Capitalism, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you. So you talk about your book, you start with your early childhood and the events that shaped you there. Your father was hardworking and creative. What did you learn from those early childhood experience, and your value of hard work? Let's talk about like that time frame, because I felt like that
Yeah.
really shaped who you became, because you are certainly driven.
Yeah, it's funny. My dad was a UPS driver, but he was always entrepreneurial and always had this like hustle mindset. I feel like he just had a lot of energy. And so beyond working his day job as a driver, he, you know, wanted to aspire for more and give us a good life and be a good provider. So he was an entrepreneur and he had a lot of different businesses. Initially, he had a cleaning company. Then he became into screen printing and embroidery. And that was a whole business that I helped him spin up. I was literally like 11 years old when he brought this equipment home. And at the end of the day, like by the time I was 16, I was helping him. I was delivering all of the product to customers. I was screen printing the product in the garage. And so I always had a drive from that young age to want to make my own money and provide for myself. And I moved out when I was 17. That's also when I started my recruiting career, because I wanted a real job. I wanted to quit the pizza place and make actual money while I was going to college. And I think if I hadn't have had to work, I probably would have stayed in swimming, because I was a swimmer and that was really my passion. But it was challenging in college if you don't have a scholarship or you don't have other ways to afford your life. If you don't have a family that's paying those bills to be an athlete. So for me, I had to make a big pivot when I was 17 and find a way to pay my bills. And so that's what I did. I just pursued my career and continued to go to school while working initially. And I think in the early days of my career, what contributed to a lot of my success was me saying yes. I said yes to a lot of things. I was handed very random opportunities and maybe in some cases roles that other people might not have taken, but I would get excited about moving somewhere or doing something different. And I probably was a manager's dream, because they'd put anything in front of me and I'd be like, yeah, I want to do it. I want to learn it. Let's go.
Yeah. So you mentioned the swimming, so you have in your business, in saying yes, you also, it felt like you had, you were always going to succeed. You were going to outperform others. And that was really, it felt like that was really what was going to drive you. You had the intellect to be able to do it. And you had this like insane drive to be able to keep the hours going. And I remember reading about that swimming experience maybe you could share that early story, because it felt like that really shaped a bit about who you became. And the example was the swim coach and your mom talking together about your possibility.
Yeah. So I was 6 years old when I tried out for my local swim team, and I didn't know how to swim very well. So I had to cross the pool, and I got there, but I struggled and it was not pretty. And I got out of the pool, and I remember overhearing the coach tell my mom that, she basically said I wasn't good. She's like, yeah, she's not a good swimmer. This is not her sport. Like, you got to bring her back later. She can't be on the team this year. And that really was pivotal. I feel like that was like an early childhood trauma for me, because what I took from that and what I heard in the back of my mind was that I wasn't good. Like, all I kept hearing was that I wasn't good. So I would kind of beg my mom to bring me back again, and begged the coach to let me try. And she agreed. And the coach was like, yeah, I guess we can put her on the team, but she's not going to be in a lot of events. And, she's really got to work on this. And so I committed, and then I wanted to be the best. And then I was really like over indexing on the need for acceptance and the need for achievement and to win. And I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, because initially, like, that's part of the inner work that I've been unpacking for the last few years. Before I even started writing this book, and this was a thing, one of the memories that came to me was that experience, because I was sitting with why am I like this? Why do I feel this need for validation that's so extreme? Like, why do I have just this, insatiable appetite for more, and it's never enough, or despite being good at whatever it is? And so in a lot of my inner work and coaching, we got down to that kind of time frame and that story that stood out. And it's funny because my mom doesn't even remember it. Like, I've told her it and she's like, that didn't happen. I'm like, but it did, because I remember, because I was 6, and why would I still be talking about this? So
Yeah, it felt like it was really impactful, but it also felt like it served kind of path, like that if you could overcome that, then you can overcome anything. And you graduated top of your class. You went to college. You went to college early, right? I mean, so you were like totally driven. So tell us, just for the audience who hasn't yet read your book, talk about that early part of your career. You mentioned that you would do anything. You said yes to everything, and then launching .connect, and how you really made that decision to step into being your own boss before you realized that you became a toxic boss. You had this business that you started and you launched. I mean, that takes a lot of courage. There's a lot of courage in you.
yeah. So I started my career at 17. I worked at a building products company, and I had an incredible VP of recruiting, or HR, and I had an incredible team of mentors that were all, 10, 20 years older than me, and taking me under their wing and really coaching me and mentoring me, and not necessarily treating me like I was as young and green as I was, but really just treating me as an equal on the team, and looking out for me, but also like giving me the tough love. And so I spent about 5 years at that company, and then I followed that same Boston team to another company, worked there for a few years, moved to Wisconsin when I was 22. I call that like my living MBA, because I worked at a biotech company under the general manager of that location. I was so young, and I was there to hire a couple hundred people, train a bunch of leaders and executives on how to hire. And I remember I was in training events, like 100 people a week that we were bringing in and training and leading. And I had an assistant at the time whose name was Dawn. So you had Dawn and Dom, and she was about 15 years older than me. And we were just like a badass dream team together. And she really respected me, and I was teaching her things, even though I was, way earlier in my career. So in that experience, it was almost a year. I decided Wisconsin was a little too cold, so I wanted to go back to California. And I successfully did what I needed to do there, went back to California, and then felt like I didn't want to just work for one company. I really got bored of that. I wanted to be able to see a lot of different companies and how they were running and being built and all of that. And so consulting came to me, and I worked with a woman named Iris Libby, who's now retired, but one of my original mentors and just an amazing human being. And through working with her and her consulting business, she kind of set up how the original days of Dot was structured, in that she had a remote first team before remote was even a thing. This is back like 15 years ago. And she would go out and get all the work and get all the clients based on her reputation and her ability to do the work. And then, farm it out to her team of 30 people. And I was, again, the youngest on the team, but had amazing mentors and people I worked with. And I loved consulting. And so through that experience, I developed a lot of relationships on my own, and people who had worked with me started calling me. And then I got my own consulting clients outside of working with her, still had her almost as a client. And then my consulting business grew, just my solopreneurship, me running all of it. And that also created what was this like workaholism, because there's only so many hours in the day and days in the week, but it was constant. But at the same time, I was super motivated by money. And so I was making a lot of money, working a lot. And it was a kind of a slippery slope, because then I also, enjoyed the aspect of earning a lot of money and being able to have a lifestyle, but it really wasn't a lifestyle, because I couldn't even take a vacation. I couldn't take 5 seconds away from my computer because I had so many clients and so much work at the time. Even in these, interesting down periods of the economy, we were still really busy and people were still hiring. So it created, what was this cycle and addiction to work. And again, like addiction to achievement and all of the things that I had seen from my early life. But about, I would say, I don't know, 8 years into my solopreneurship, it was 2018, and it was like, enough. I could not do one more thing. I can't work any harder or take any more clients on. I hired a few part-time people to help me with some of the work. And then I decided in 2019, it was time to like flip all my clients and bring in my team. I didn't have a team. This was an idea. I was terrified, and I didn't know if the clients would do it. I thought they only love me and they'll only ever work with me. And oh my gosh, if I tell them I have a team, what if they decide not to work with me? And so I was super, super scared, but I approached one of my main clients and they just kept giving me more and more roles. And it was at a point where I couldn't handle it. And I said, okay, I have a team. And they were like very surprised. They're like, oh, perfect. Well, let's bring your team in. Let's do this. And so that gave me a little bit of confidence to then go to the rest of my clients, tell them, hey, I've got a team and, let's do this. But in that, it was so scary to jump off the ledge. And then I did. And then it was like, I said this in my book, it was like trading one burnout for another, because I was like fully burnt out on the individual contributor work of being a solopreneur recruiter, to then now being a business owner and never having run or owned or led or any of that. It was a whole new ball game of things that started to come up, which kind of built over time and then led to what I have as my like defining almost breakdown moment in the middle of 2020.
Yeah, that was it's interesting to hear you kind of fill in even more of the details around how you transitioned. So you're moving into building a team in the 2018, 2019, not knowing that the pandemic is about to hit. But how did that, you mentioned your son and you talk about your husband, Gulliver in the book. But what about your relationships that you had along the way, friendships and, other relationships that you're in? How were you able to build the solopreneur career within Connect, and how those were affected, how they affected you, how you impacted them, and to shape you into how you approach everybody in your life?
Yeah, I mean, the initial early days of Dot, I brought in good friends of mine to work with me. I brought in family, people I trusted. That was really, really important. In the beginning, I was terrified to even put a website out and say that like we were a company, because if it all failed, I was like, oh, well, at least people still know me and I'll be okay. I don't want to like say that this is going to happen and then it doesn't work. And then, it was for me still a very like ego. I was in a very ego mind, and I really want to protect, my reputation and everything I had already done with my brand and whatnot. And it was challenging. It's not easy to work with family and close friends. And through this experience, my relationships have evolved, my friendships have changed, and not just from working together, but also from doing my inner work. I find that, I was writing about this the other day, like the deeper I go in my inner work, the smaller my circle is getting. And I'm okay with that. And there's also seasons of relationships that I'm finding, there's people I wrote about in my book that I was not connecting with through this experience, and then have recently been back in touch with and am connecting with again. And so I feel like, the people in your life, family or friends that are for you, they'll show up in different seasons. And, the ones that are truly there to stick around will stick around, and others, it's okay. Like, I think as adults, it's probably something we don't talk about, but when a friendship has its time and it's wrapping up, it's okay. You can kind of move forward, and you don't necessarily have to feel like you have to maintain something that isn't working anymore or isn't in alignment with your values anymore.
So I'm hearing you say is that those friendships and relationships that kind of pulled you through and you were building your career and you were driven and you were still ego driven and driven by money, and those were the things that were kind of defining you, your reputation, your brand. As you started to shift into, we'll talk about that, the big impact in a second, but that became, maybe I should phrase it as a question, that the ego became less important and started to shift away from you.
Yeah, I would say in my inner work, what I've learned is that your ego is part of you. So it's never going to go away. Even those who are so enlightened will talk about it. Like, your ego is someone and something that you need to make friends with. And so I like to call it the dance between ego and essence, like my purest soul's expression, that is my essence. And that is like me and my best and my highest vibration and what I bring to the world and all of my gifts. And then my ego is, me and my humanness and my lower vibrational self, and not always conscious. And like, there's that dance, because it's not perfect. Just because you're committed to inner work and conscious leadership and conscious living, doesn't mean that you're not still a human being navigating human stuff. Like, I'm still a parent and my son triggers me a lot. And so I've got to navigate that. I'm not always in my purest expression of self when I'm yelling at him about his video games. Like, that's just life stuff. So I definitely have found a nice balance between ego and essence right now, and how I try and show up.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Okay, so you have an opportunity to take on a big client in the 2018, 2019, 2020 time frame, and you move your family to New Jersey. And why don't you share a little bit about that experience? And because that's when the big shift starts to happen. And I'd also, why don't you share that, and then we'll talk about how you found your coach. And so let's go through that period of time, because was really impactful.
Yeah. So my first boss, the same boss that hired me when I was 17, called me one day and recruited me. He was like, "Hey, I'm moving to New Jersey to work for this company, and we're bringing the band back together." And I had nostalgia of like my early days of working and how exciting that was, but it had been a long time since we as a team had ever worked together, and I had worked with him. And so I'm like, there's no way you're going to convince my Australian surfer husband to move to New Jersey. Like, let's give it a shot, but it's probably going to be a no. So long story short, we went and did a tour. Gully loved it. It was so beautiful in Princeton where we were going to live. It was so green and lush, and it was like different from the rat race of Orange County where we were living in California. So he was sold, and we moved across the country. We bought a house, and that changed really quickly because my boss ended up leaving the company like pretty much like 3 months after we got there. And then I was kind of like, okay, well, the band's not back together, and what am I going to do now? And I continued to work with that company for a while, but at the same time, I was so focused, and I was not distracted by the pace of Orange County and all my friends and all the things I used to do, that I just started getting all these clients from the West Coast that wanted me to work with them. And so I became very, very busy, but it was like, I think I talk about a little bit about this in the book. I was living in this house, and the room that was my office just like was caving in on me. It was like so tiny and so much work. And I never left the house and never left my office. And I kind of just was like, what am I doing? What is all of this for? Like, this is not working. And, I don't know what to do. I had a lot of that, like, going on in my head. And the same time, we ended up buying another house in New Jersey, which was like our dream house. It was the creme de la creme. It was it for me. It was like my statement to the world of how successful I had become. And it was very ego purchase. But it was so beautiful. And so we loved this house. And, lucky for us, we had bought it right before COVID hit, because we were locked down there for, I think, four months of lockdown, where I literally did not leave my property, didn't even get in my car, because it was early days. And so New York, New Jersey, it was really scary. We didn't really know what was going on then. But that's really kind of where I reached the point where I had to face off with myself, because prior to being there, I was traveling all the time. I was in San Francisco, I was in LA, Miami, like I was gone 24/7 working. And sometimes I would make up trips just to go work and to be out of my, office and just out of my life, creating a bigger wedge between me and my husband, and also me and my son, because I was not around for his early childhood. I was making the money, and to me, I would justify it. Well, like, I'm a money maker and I'm a businesswoman, and my son's going to really love this and admire me when I get older, because, blah, 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 the lifestyle. And then when COVID hit and we were locked down, that's when it was just very confronting, because there was nowhere to go. There was nothing to distract me. There was just us, the three of us there. And then my sister and her boyfriend were also quarantining with us, which added another layer of stress. But it was challenging, and it was really hard. And I remember, like, it was May of 2020. I just woke up one morning and I would not get out of bed. And I was like, this is it. I've had it. I've had it with myself. Nobody else, but like, why do I feel this way? Like, look at my life, look at what I have, and it's not enough. Like, what the hell? Like, what else is there then? And why do I feel like this? And so that's when I started doing some research around, inner work and healing. And so I came across my coach, and it was at that point in time, but I wasn't even familiar with coaching. I didn't even know
Had
about
somebody
personal
recommended inner work to you? Was that something that somebody's like, you need to do your work?
Yeah. So I was in a mastermind for women in business the year prior, and I met Lindsay, a friend of mine, and she was big on inner work. I didn't even know the term, but I was just following her on Instagram and following her journey. And so she really inspired me to rethink everything that I was going through. And that then led me to looking at a coach. And then, that started everything.
So when you met the coach, you had, you shared your values and your values for your team. And then fast forward. I mean, it was like, within like a couple of years, I mean, you really dove in, like you committed, and which is not surprising given everything that you just shared about yourself, that when you make the decision, you're in. And so do you remember the values that you had and the values that you now have, and how they show up for your team and for you? And, because it feels like there's no separation between your values and the values that show up for work.
Yeah. So my initial values, and this is so funny, like Angie sends me this list of values and she says, rank them 1 to 5. And there's a lot of them on there. And at the time, I was so, I don't know, I guess cynical, or just like glass half empty type of mentality. And I looked at all these values and I'm like, well, none of them are a 5, not even family. That's not a 5. That's like a 3.5. I don't know. We'll see. And so I did the sheet, and the values that did come up as my most important when I first started working with her were financial freedom and abundance, challenge, and mental stimulation. And that was me to a T, because I would work, I would be stressed out and overcommitted. And then I would just be like taking on the next hard thing. If anyone would come to me like the hardest hiring project you ever had in your life, I'd be like, oh, I want to do that. Give it to us. We'll gladly sign up for that. And so that was me for like the first, I don't know, 8 months of working with Angie. And then in about January of 2021, I started feeling differently and realizing that I was basically done with being these two personas, the like me at work and like professional consult speak, really polished, hard-nosed perfectionist driver boss and consultant person, and then also when I would log off being like the silly fun mom and just being more in my own energy. So I really thought about that, and I committed to re-looking at my values. And it was more like, how do I want to feel? It wasn't like how I felt at the moment in January of 21. It was more like, how do I want my life to feel, and how do I want my days to feel, and what energy do I want to bring? And so in my reset, I really proclaimed my values to be peace and tranquility, creativity, and time freedom. And that also then began the shift within my company's values. So later on that year, we revisited our company values to be mindfulness, willingness to help, driven and a growth mindset, ownership and delivery, and fun. And even fun was like a stretch. We were like, we're going to put fun on there because we're actually not super fun. Like recruiting is very stressful. Like there's not a lot of fun in this. We're like, let's put it on there for a stretch because we want to put it out there. We want to be mindful of at least intending to try and have some fun in the chaos that is our world a little bit.
So I want to let others ask some questions, but I want to two more things I want to kind of explore with you. So we're getting a picture of your inner journey, and there's so much more to talk about here. We'll probably need a part two. How did it show up for your team? When you first, you started doing this inner work and start bringing some of what you're learning to them, skepticism, excitement, kind of like, oh, this is weird. And then how is it now that you've been on this journey for 3+ years? So now what is the business like, and share how it has impacted your business?
Yeah.
Because we talked about conscious capitalism, like, leadership, you mentioned this in the intro, leadership's an inside job. Got to work on yourself, and leaders get the teams they deserve. And so, when you're doing your work, then your teams will show up in a different way as well. So conscious leadership is one of the 4 tenets of conscious capitalism, is so they're all important, and it is so important.
Yeah. I would say initially my team, and rightfully so, were like very skeptical, lots of eye rolls, lots of like, okay, lots of slacks of like, I don't know if I believe this, and what she's now bringing to the table. And so there was some resistance, but I feel like what really had to click for me first was the embodiment of the work. And so I think this is important for conscious leaders and conscious people. It's not about talking about it. It's about being about it. It's about the energy that you carry and how you show up when things are not going well. Like when you are triggered, when you are stressed out, when you do have to run payroll and you don't know where the next thing's coming through. All of that is when you really are practicing your conscious leadership, and then how that shows up for your team. So I really looked and reimagine my role as like the chief energizing officer and the chief culture builder. And so I had to really hold myself to a higher standard and embody everything that I was learning, and not talk about it anymore. I had to be about it. I had to bring them in on the journey and plant the seeds for them to enroll themselves. So it was not so much me telling as much as it was invitations for the things that were helping me. So I brought breath work into our team culture as a practice. And initially, when not everyone showed up, I would get frustrated and go, oh, forget it. I'm not going to do this if you guys aren't going to do this. That was my attitude. Instead of really rethinking about like, hey, this will be who it's for. And I'm happy if whoever that ends up being on our team has the experience that they need. And so I'm going to keep experimenting and bringing different modalities that have helped me in my expansion of consciousness to the team. And I wouldn't take it personally. Initially, I took a lot of stuff personally, and I wanted everyone to like be on my same journey. And it came to a point in my journey where I had more acceptance of myself, and thus in turn acceptance of others. And really, Seth Godin talks about a term called sonder. And so really seeking sonder and appreciating that everybody's on their own journey and their own timeline. That also plays into my relationship with my husband, because he wasn't first on this consciousness journey. And he was also like my team, like, okay, like this is just a new thing she's into now, but like, let's see. And I'll share with you, yesterday we have relationship coaches, and he gave me a reflection, and he said, I want to acknowledge you for how much you've softened, how your energy's changed, how committed you are to our family, how much time you want to spend with us, how loving you are. Like, this just happened yesterday. And I was like, thank you for acknowledging me. And also, like, oh my gosh, it's taken me 3 years plus to like finally get the acknowledgement and really feel it and feel like this is shifting. So it takes time. I think when you're being a conscious leader and you're bringing stuff to your team, you have to say less, be more, and just plant seeds and watch them grow. You know, another thing that I'll say about our team now and what's been so beautiful is we're in recruiting. There's not a lot of recruiting happening at the scale in which it was happening for the last few years. So my company grew like that, and now it's not growing. And that's okay. But what has happened, we've had to make changes. We've had to let people go. People had to have chosen to move on, all of those things. And I can tell you that every single day I get a text, an email, a call, a Slack, a message from someone who was on the team that is praying for us, that is saying that we've changed their lives, or the work with our teams changed their lives, or how we've impacted their life today, how they want to come back, how they can't wait till we get busy again. Like, that is the biggest reflection of being a conscious leader. And I always said that, like, it wasn't about all the growth and the success and everything that we accomplished as a team. Whoever worked on the team, I wanted them to make it the best place they ever worked. So that way they always would remember it. They would say, oh, I love Dot Connect. That was the best time in my career. I learned so much, or I got introduced to breath work there, or whatever it is. I just wanted it to be the best for that, because I know not everyone's going to stay with us forever, you know, and so that's okay.
They're just listening to you. I just admire your courage and your vulnerability, and it comes through in your book as well. And I remember I started reading. I'm like, wow, okay, so you're still so young, and you know, and then you go through this journey, and you decide to write a book, and like you've been doing your work for 3 years. I'm like, you know, why now? Well, maybe it's, you know, here now, but you know, then I started reading it. I'm like, man, this woman has so much courage to show up and to tell not just the beautiful end of the story, but all the pieces in between, and just really appreciating that, because I could have just been like, yeah, you know, I don't know why she's writing it, but it is really, it hangs together, and it's just very beautifully written. And before we turn it over to questions, I want to kind of wrap this with the impact that your grandmother had on you. And you know, she is the namesake for your company, and she's still part of your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's one of my spirit guides, if you're into the woo like I am. And I pray with her, I connect to her. Breathwork for me is just like the direct plug into really being able to experience that source loving energy. And so I get a lot of that from her, and I get a lot of guidance from her. So, you know, when I am struggling in my life, my relationships, my work, I get still, and then I can hear, you know, how she's guiding me and directing me. And I always just say, like, it's no coincidence that it's her name that is the namesake of the company that then was already magically my, you know, career before it even existed. Like, it was kind of like in the stars to be in the type of role and lead the type of company that I lead, from her, from before we even knew any of this stuff. So I honor her tremendously. And I feel so lucky to have had time with her. Both of my grandmas, my grandma Claudia was a little bit different. Like Grandma Dorothy was it for me. Grandma Claudia was completely different, but also amazing. But yeah, she's just, if the people on the call have their grandmothers, like call them and just listen to them and tell them that you love them and hear what they have to say, because there's just so much wisdom.
Thank you for that. Your story through the relationships that you have was a beautiful way of amplifying your personal and your professional, and the dot connected. It just connects so perfectly. Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you to offer up some audience questions.
Well, wonderful. Thank you to everyone who has submitted questions. We have a robust list of questions here for you, Dom. I'm going to start with a question from Andrea, and she asks, how has your business reset impacted your client relationships? And also, how has this impacted new client development efforts?
Yeah, it's impacted client relationships a lot. So there's chapters I share in the book about, resetting relationships and working this year, definitely with more conscious companies and more values aligned companies. So we learned the hard way a couple of times that just because you say that you're values aligned or mission driven or people first or whatever you put out there doesn't mean that you always are. And so, when I was early in growing Dot and like experimenting with our process and practicing and learning and training the team, we were very much about logos. Like we chased and got all of the logos we ever wanted. And that was an exciting time and it was great. And we were able to generate revenue that then was able to give us more time to learn about ourselves as a company. But I wouldn't trade that for the type of work that we've been doing this year and with the clients that we work with this year, even though they've been of a smaller scale, because the clients this year have been much more aligned for us values wise. So we have had to really shift how we're doing business. And even now we've created different offerings. Like before, we were definitely more like enterprise recruiting level, where you'd come and get 20 of our recruiters that were embedded in a big tech company. Now we're a lot more boutique and small, and I'm vetting all of the projects that come our way against, who we want to work with. So we don't work with everybody anymore, and we're not chasing logos. Like I would rather have a no-name logo, nothing, but an amazing founder that we want to help build something than any of the other big behemoths that we had worked with.
Thank you for that. I want to jump to a question from Miriam, and apologies if I'm not pronouncing that name correctly, but the question is, I'm convinced that inner work and a great leadership is the great work of our time to redefine leadership and success. And just to compliment your wonderful case study of a bigger paradigm shift that's underway. And Miriam asks, she'd like you to share a little bit more about your inner work and what helped you shift. What was that pivot? I mean, you mentioned COVID, of course, but if there's anything else you might want to add, it would help the question.
I will say COVID, I decided to take responsibility. So I got to a place where I was so in my victim consciousness. Everything was happening to me. Why is this happening? Oh, this sucks, blah, blah, blah. And I had just had enough. So it was like my soul essence just like shut my inner critic and my inner voice down. It was so powerful. It was truly like a calling, like we can't do this anymore. This is not going to work. You're going to end up in a not good way. So it was a very strong inner calling, but then just practically the things I started doing was, the first thing I did was invest in a coach. That was scary. I'd never coached before. I had a therapist years ago, but I didn't know what I was really getting myself into. And then that coach, we started kind of chipping away. You kind of think of it like, a big square marble, right? And we're chipping it away to see like, what is really the magic that's underneath? What's the form underneath? That's kind of how I felt. But in addition to coaching, I then got involved in communities, like finding your people who are maybe now the people that you want to be around more. And I found a whole new set of community and people through Conscious Capitalism, through other groups that I was in as well, through Chief, whatever. I also experimented with psychedelics, and that was like so scary for me. I talk about that in my book, but I'm like a type A personality, control freak. That was how I was. And so to get into the world of expanding your consciousness through plant medicine and really having to surrender, and like, you don't control anything. There is no control there. You really got to just let yourself go. That was very scary. So a lot of the inner work stuff is, yes, taking courage, but also when you do the things that scare you, you build self-trust. And so, it doesn't have to be psychedelics. It doesn't have to be breath work. But, one of the things I was telling my friend about the other day was I hiked Machu Picchu in Peru. I don't hike, and I didn't know we were hiking. Nobody told me we were going to Machu Picchu, but I thought we were just going to do touristy stuff. So I'm like, okay, this is cool, whatever. This is at the end of a whole other plant medicine trip that we were on. And so I'm tired. It's the last day on the trip. And we get there and they're like, yeah, we're going to hike this to the top. I'm like, well, I can't even see the top. They're like, yeah, but we're going. I'm like, okay. So we go, and I'm walking 1 foot at a time, just one step at a time. And initially my inner critic was like, you hate this. This sucks. What the heck? We don't do this. This is stupid. I would say about an hour in, I just surrendered, dropped into presence. And then it was like, hiking's cool. Look at you. You're doing this. Look how pretty. Isn't that beautiful? So why don't you stop and smell the roses? Like, then it was a whole shift that was so impactful. It changed my life because I got to the top of the mountain an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later. I cried and cried and cried. And then I was like, holy shit, like, look at me just like changing stuff. Like, I can do this hard thing. I can do this scary thing. I can climb a mountain one step at a time instead of like seeing the mountain and saying no. I just go little by little by little. So I think you kind of take that and apply it to your life. It's just little by little by little. If you're committing to your inner work because you want to make massive shifts in your life, you don't have to go do all the things. Just do one little thing and commit to it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that reflection. I do want to be respectful of your time, as well as the time of our attendees. I know we're a little bit over. Okay, if I ask 1 or 2 more questions?
Yeah, do it.
Okay. I'll ask the final question here. This is from Nancy. She asks, what has changed in terms of your clients' requests in terms of conscious leadership? Are you finding that is something that your clients are asking? How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think it's still new. I feel like some clients have no idea that there is a thing called conscious leadership, believe it or not. It's still not mainstream, which I love, because to me, that means there's a huge opportunity to make an impact and really guide and influence the movement that is conscious leadership. But I will say the future of work is with conscious leaders. So I personally love to work with emerging leaders or founders who are maybe growing teams that maybe they feel like how I felt. They feel like alone and confused and frustrated and nothing's enough. And how do they get out of this cycle or hamster wheel that they're in? So I do feel like there is an interest. It's just not as mainstream yet as we would see.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to make a quick note to our attendees. I did put a survey link in the chat. If you could just take a moment to complete that. It does help with our future programming. And Karen, I'm happy to close out this session, or if there's any final remarks you want to make.
No, I just wanted to appreciate Dom and thank her for joining us at our virtual gathering. The conversation around conscious leadership is such an important one. Thank you for being a part of Conscious Capitalism and all the work that you're doing, because we're shaping the future of work. We're shaping the future of business together as a community. So I want to thank all of us. Appreciate all of you being here with us today. It's been it's been really insightful. It's been a lot of fun. Really proud of you, and we will make sure that we share your book with our community. And I look forward to seeing you at the CEO Summit, and with probably many of the folks that are going to be here that are here on the virtual gathering on the call with us today in October 24th through 26th. So we will continue this conversation here and at the summit.
Thank you so much.
All
Thank
right.
you, Dom. Thank you, Karen. Thanks to everyone who joined today. Thank you.
Thank you.